My name is Jaime Nieman, and I've been in Dilijan since the school opened in 2014. Before that, I was teaching at University of Alicante in Spain, various classes of international relations and history. Before that, I taught at an international school in Rome, and before that, I was also teaching in a public school where my teaching journey started in Los Angeles.
So, and what about problematic areas?
The first thing that I realized as I've been teaching for almost 15 years is that this space, this community, this type of students required something else. And I didn't realize what it was at the time. But slowly I started understanding that I could make small changes and little adjustments to adapt to the diverse needs of our community.
Our assessment in the global politics classroom is formed on a continuum, and we don't really receive grades. Instead, we have conversations with Jaime about how we feel like we're learning and how we kind of actually digest the information that we're provided within class.
My class became a gradeless classroom about 3 years ago because I realized that the conversations that I was having with the students were not the ones that I wanted to have. I would hear them coming into my class and saying, "What did you get in biology? 6, 5, 4, 3? And this isn't the conversation I wanted to have. I wanted to put the learning in the front and start to discuss about the learning and how they were progressing in terms of their learning rather than how they were progressing in terms of their number.
What I appreciate about Jaime's way of teaching is the way how he really lets the class lead the discussion itself. It's more of a debate, and through these debates we get to learn new things about the case study because everyone has something to add to the conversation.
I also realized that the grades themselves were inhibiting the students from seeing the potential and the growth that they had available to them. So by changing the language and putting the learning goals and learning in front and part of our conversations, it really transformed our relationships, both my relationship with them and the relationship they had with their peers. Because now they could see examples of different types of work and different types of achievement in terms of learning goals, and it didn't have that emotional charge or that high stakes hierarchical sense of ranking that the grade delivered to them.
I'm so used to having a structure set out. I'm so used to having, okay, we're doing this, this, this. But sometimes what Jaime will do is he'll start something one class, and he'll start another topic another class, and then the third class will go back to this topic, but then we're merging it with other classes. And I feel like, for me, that's really scary. I'm not used to it. But at the same time, it's good to put myself out of that comfort zone, because then I realize, well, when reflecting upon it, I realize that that is what's gonna get me to see things in a multi-structural perspective, because I'm able to pick something from one class and another class and then merge it so that I can complete this new project.
There was resistance. Students who had always defined their journey in school about the grade all of a sudden felt, how will I know how I'm doing? How do I know what is important? The journey is important. The struggle is important, the challenges. And by opening up this space, an open space, a safe space, to try, fail, to tinker, this allowed for something completely new to emerge.
So you don't have to be afraid to not know something, it's completely fine. And I think that helps to create a safe environment for our global learning.
But the irony is that they're not the only ones trying, tinkering, risking. I'm also part of that. And I mold that by trying new approaches, adapting new methods, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't work, and that's okay. But that encourages them to take risks, and that, in the end, increases their experience and their performance.
We go through each point and we kind of debate it together, but it kind of doesn't allow maybe for everybody to speak and a little bit more time for you guys to reflect on these things.
The dream, of course, for every teacher is PLE, personalized learning environment. This is something I'm still working on and trying to develop, but it was something where it brings the individual in the center of the experience. And we can use that as incredible material to shape and mold their journey. One thing that I also discovered very early on from the research, from the neuroscience, was that there's 4 things that connect and activate the brain. And I wanted to make sure that out of those 4 things, I wouldn't use one of them and I would empower and try to develop the other 3. The ones that I cared about were agency and control. When you have control, you get connected. And this has been a central aspect of what we've tried to do in the class. The second thing is pleasure. I've heard teachers many times say, learning is not a fun business, you really need to have some pain in it. It's challenging, but it could be pleasurable in many ways, and accepting the challenges as pleasure was my way of changing the discourse. The third thing was cognition. They need stimulation. You need to get excited about the things that you're learning. And you do that by connecting with those around you and harnessing the critical mass in the room, and also by connecting with the issues that matter to the student.
I feel like the discussion should be more about the word equitable, because of course...
The one that I wanted to eliminate out of the picture was fear. It's the kind of the classic one that we see in the dynamic in the classroom, the relationship between teacher and student, and fear of being judged or assessed or failing. And of course the grade kind of comes into that as a real debilitator in the learning. And we talk about critical thinking, but I also wanted to explore critical feeling, right? We feel before we think. And therefore, dealing with emotions and the thing that for many teachers might be uncomfortable, right? But in order to kind of avoid and soften those tense conflicts and interactions that always happen when grading happens, we don't wait till that. We deal with emotions from the beginning. What are people feeling as we're reading these things? How are your own personal ideas? How is your own process of judging yourself inhibiting you from learning and growing? And those are debilitators that don't seem to be anywhere in the learning goals and in the subject guide, but are invisible variables that impact and affect learning.
I think we all agree on the non-violent part.
We are trying to use the learning goals and the learning outcomes, but also using our own emotions and our own sense perception. We understand how can we get from here to here? How can we improve? It's a journey with Jaime, but also our own journey, and those kind of merge together. So it's a collaboration. It's a collaboration between both the teacher and us.
How do we not cooperate?
The other thing that I would think about, and I realized very early on in my journey with this new course, was that the thing that mattered from our subject guide wasn't the 70 pages that are laid out. It wasn't the assessments at the end. The content was important, but it wasn't the essential thing. What really mattered was the first 3 pages of each subject guide in every class, and that is the learning goals. Both the learning goals of the group, whatever group you are in, and the learning goals of the course. And if you can take those learning goals and reinvent and try out different ways of having those manifested and developing those skills, then any assessment that would happen at the end, you would succeed. So also my bet as a teacher is I'm taking a long-term bet. I'm not thinking of the short term. They're only with me for 2 years, but I'm trying to create and plant a certain set of culture, a certain set of understanding yourself in your environment, a certain set of thinking about yourself in relation to the world, and all the values that we harness and care about in the UWC movement. So my class is not only about global politics, but it's about self-cultivation. And it's about openness and experimentation, and how the learner or the student puts their own personal political paradigm in the center of their experience and their learning journey.
About Jaime's classes, what's cool is that we get to challenge our political paradigms, and we get to see our political views through different case studies, and also the fact that the class has so much diversity and people from different backgrounds get to say their opinions from different perspectives. And everyone has a change of either ideas or opinions, and we get to implement it on an academic level, which is what Jaime provides us with.
And how do you, I guess you guys are going to have to come up with a common rating, right?
What I take from global politics, I go and apply it to other conversations in other classrooms, and I'm like, hey, this is what we came up with in global politics, and it applies here because such and such and such and such. And because we came up with it as students, I feel like it's better, and we can apply it to more situations.
So, for example, we were discussing in my literature class talking about Afghanistan, so we had...
This is completely more realistic because in life you don't get a set plan. Or if you have a boss or something, you don't get your boss saying, I need this, this, and this. You get your boss saying, okay, this has to be done, but you have to do it alone. and sometimes you'll face challenges from everywhere, and you have to take your own knowledge and what knowledge has been given to you, and you have to use all of that to do the task before you, so Globo helps.
One of the first things that I kind of discovered, and it's very much accepted as a new way of pedagogy, is project-based learning. But what I do with my project-based learning was incorporate a methodology that came from software development, and it's called Scrum. So just like in rugby, you have players coming together and joining forces, Scrum provides a specific methodology that allows for transparency, adaptation, and also accountability. And so it creates a very specific structure through which a project can emerge, and it eliminates all these classic variables of projects gone wrong where one student does everything and the others don't participate at all. And this project-based methodology, which I truly believe in and I've seen students really empowered by, has created a really nice structure and way that we can work in projects and have the critical mass of the group mobilizing forward. So a very simple approach to this is I sometimes define what the learning goals are and what the assessment criteria will be for any given project. And we as a class can decide what the work method is. And we can produce a classic essay if we want at the end of this to display learning. That could be a collective essay or an individual essay. It could be a website. We can design infographics. The sky's the limit in terms of the products that we can produce. But the beauty of Scrum and project-based methodology is that it's not about the product, but about the process and what happens in the learning and how we can adapt and address any issues through the 2-week or 3-week sprint that we have. And we can make adaptations and catch things before they turn a corner. And the other thing that happens in this methodology is that conflicts emerge. And how do students deal with conflict? How do you work in a team that isn't functioning at its best? And the students have to deal with those. And sometimes I can come in and help and support, but this autonomy that it gives the team gives them a sense of empowerment and pride on their whole journey.
It helps us see different articles or different political events that are happening in today's world in a more analytical level. We are supposed to not only give our opinion and the description of the event itself, but also to input some sort of analysis based on a certain level. Maybe it might be international, regional, or even the way how we look at the political events, such as the postmodernist point of view that allows us to analyze the event in different ways.
Another thing that I've used, another method, has been 20% time that I took from Google. Google allows its employees to work 20% on what they call passion projects. So I've managed within the curriculum, within the topics that we have to do, I've invited students to produce and develop month-long passion projects. And the things that they kept telling me was, I couldn't wait to get to class because I knew that I had a project and I had a thing that I was in control of and that I decided. And this was incredible feedback that helped me realize that I was doing something well.
And again, it's from your own experience, but everybody in the community.
I really appreciate the way Jaime says the relation with the students. He's always asking how we're doing, and the fact that he never says that something is wrong, rather that he gives a comment as a suggestion. So we really get to form our own opinions.
Well, I don't want this to feel like a classroom. I slowly developed and added different elements to the class. So we try to explore all the senses. How could we get the body back in to learning? The thing I started realizing as students would come into my space was that they were coming from physics or they were coming from mathematics, a double chemistry, and they were probably experiencing cognitive overload. And so one way of kind of loosening that overload was to create something physical and something that would have them kind of set their mind back into place. A lot to do with this idea of mindfulness or meditation. And I had done Tai Chi for 2 years. I had practiced it. I wasn't an expert, but I knew the basics. And I said, why not use this either at the beginning of double periods, in the middle of double periods, as a way of disconnecting and loosening that cognitive dissonance, the memory and the overload, to help loosen those practices. And so we would learn over our 2-year journey, not only attend form of Tai Chi, but incorporate self-cultivation and also all the content and the skills that we needed for the Global Politics course.
It doesn't really relate to the subject global, but it's really enjoyable for all of us, all the students, because we are all together.
By making us do something unusual, such as Tai Chi, and all of us are doing this unusual thing, then it makes us feel like we're in a more safe environment.
Tai Chi is about energy, so it's like you have to gather the energy of the others. It's like a work team, more or less. I don't know about your private life, but now we are in our classes, we have to enjoy together. So just leave your problems outside and let's have fun together.
Another thing that I've used a lot is simulations and role-playing scenarios. And there's a vast approaches out there where you can use structured simulations, you can use unstructured ones, and a whole bunch of interesting things emerge.
And also something really interesting and cool is the different simulations that we do. For example, the model diplomacy, where we got to put a play of the Security Council of the US on the Bahrain uprising. And it really lets the student lead its own ideas rather than the teacher imposing a certain opinion on the student.
And definitely, this is where you can also explore in these simulations, things happen that you don't expect to happen. Certain dynamics emerge, and you can bring those into the reflective space. And this is something that all of these methods need to incorporate and use. We reflect on our learning in order to see what's working well, what isn't working well, and how do we know that things aren't working well? We're always asking for evidence, and we're always asking for deeper metacognition about learning processes. And that's when you change the language, you start to create a new culture and a new way of interacting, not only between the teacher and the student, but between the students themselves. And that's why I call my class not a class, but a collective.
The very first thing that Jaime asked us was this. So, who has the power in this class? Do we have to take all the decisions? Do you have to take the decisions, or should we work together? And we had to just say what we thought and discuss about it. It was really interesting.
Well, anybody else have no debate as like areas of strength?
We have to give grades at the end of the term. Our school requires them, so do universities. And how do we finalize and think about this learning journey? Students develop portfolios where they have pieces of work where they say, look at what it was like here and look at how I've adapted it to make it better. And they can prove and provide evidence for certain skills and learning objectives that we have. We look at their whole journey holistically, together, and we negotiate and discuss and think about, what do you see in this learning journey? How have you achieved your learning targets? And then I discuss from my point of view what I saw, and then we come to an agreement. And the irony of all of this is we trust the students to see what's real and what's happening. And once they see that and are able to articulate that, then they can make interventions and we can help them grow. And the more I trust them, the more I realize that we are in alignment most of the time with where we are in our journey. So this idea that students might, try to cheat us or try to, one up and get the, higher grade is a myth, because once you create the culture, you start to use the language and discuss what's important, which is skills and learning outcomes, and that can look in many different things. It's up to you how creative you want to be in how that can look like. The image of learning needs to change. Learning is a messy, dirty business. It's not clear and linear and easily observable. So we engage and are open to randomness and variability. We create and put in place certain habits and habits of mind and habits of working. But we allow for randomness, uncertainty. We actually try to approach and engage in it and try to thrive in uncertainty and randomness rather than fear it and try to take a much more secure, stable route. So risk is a part of the journey. It's calculated and measured risk, but if risk doesn't have some sort of a result, which might be failure or bad product, then there is no risk to be had. Let's be vulnerable and open to talking about the learning and what's happening in the classroom. We need to qualify and talk about what is a student of concern. What are we concerned about with regards to the learning? And this isn't very philosophical. We just need to think about What is it that we're doing in the class, and how is that mobilizing and getting us to the results that we want to achieve? We all can rally around performance. We want the students to perform and thrive. Where it gets a little bit messy and maybe a little bit more debatable is, how do we help them thrive and develop? All teachers, regardless of their teaching philosophy, want to spend more time with their fellow teachers and discuss what's happening in the classroom. We keep saying that we're a mission-based school and project. We keep talking about values, but nobody discusses the values and how those are incorporated into the process, because those aren't being assessed. Nobody is looking to measure those. Let's discuss things that maybe aren't measurable and maybe a little bit more abstract, but are central to what we're trying to achieve and do. And therefore we can come into alignment, the UWC aspects of things and what's happening with the student's experience. There doesn't need to be a disconnect and a binary between IB and UWC. That's a false dichotomy. I will say it again and again. It's a great scapegoat that teachers use, that students use, and this takes us away from actually doing the work that we need to do. And it separates something that shouldn't be separated but can be integrated.
We don't do this?
If we want innovation, we want new curricular design, we want to reinvent and reimagine what new forms learning can happen in the UWC that might be launched at the IB level, we need to think about time. Something needs to give. But I would say that one way we can imagine and think about a new curricular landscape that might open up new possibilities would be some sort of a capstone project, right? We need, possibly, that's another space we can allow for teachers to work on. An interdisciplinary capstone project that will cross across interdisciplinary boundaries, so beyond each group, and we can think about how many of those would be needed or what that would look like, and what skills we could track and set up as being the essential kind of things we need to assess and look at in that capstone project. And we can allow for a numerous set of teachers that can help facilitate and play roles of support, but we can also look outside the school and tap into our incredible networks in our different colleges that would help feed into that. And Mahindra has set up an attempt at this, and we can learn from that and see what we can take and tweak and how we can adapt that or add to that to develop something much more robust that can maybe go in line as into a new form of IB diploma, but that will need and require some space and time for curriculum planning and development.
Please finish up those focus questions, those learning goals, and the things you're doing your Human Rights Passion Project on, and I'll see you tomorrow in the Diga session. Yeah?